In the profound depths of the night, as the gentle saline breeze from the Pacific Ocean delicately caressed the ancient craggy cliffs of Barranco, a district steeped in history and shadowed by the vast ocean, a chilling tapestry of ancestral stories began to unfurl. These were not mere tales, but dark, whispered legends, carried on the nocturnal winds, speaking of a mysterious entity. Her name, a mere whisper, was woven into the very fabric of the night air, entangled with a palpable thread of both profound terror and an inexplicable, morbid fascination. This spectral figure, often described by those who dared to speak of her, presented herself with an unnerving humanoid aspect. Her face, an unsettling canvas, was entirely painted in an opaque, stark white, eerily reminiscent of the enigmatic, emotionless masks worn by street mimes. Yet there was a disturbing intensity to this whiteness, a void that defied mere theatricality. Her eyes, deep and unfathomable abysses, were of such an absolute, consuming blackness that it was a hue never before witnessed in any other creature, living or imagined. The narrative darkens further with the account of a single, horrifying encounter. In an instant of bone-chilling terror, an unsuspecting individual found himself face to face, directly confronted by this terrifying apparition. A sudden, unyielding paralysis immediately invaded his entire being, locking every nerve and muscle into an unbreakable stasis. This was no ordinary fear-induced immobility. It was born from an unknown, potent force, an unseen anchor that rooted him firmly to the spot, rendering him utterly incapable of moving even a single digit. As he stood, frozen in time and space, staring into the abyss before him, a grotesque transformation began to unfold. Before his very eyes, the entity's pristine white face started to crack, disintegrating as if it were a delicate, antique porcelain mask succumbing to immense internal pressure. Beneath the fracturing surface, horrifying marks were revealed, ghastly lacerations and disfigurements that strongly suggested a brutal, savage confrontation with some ferocious, untamed beast. From her very essence, an immense abyssal malevolence emanated, a palpable aura of profound wickedness. It was as if this figure was the very personification of evil, a dark entity that had clawed its way directly from the deepest, most shadowed recesses of the underworld itself, manifesting in the human realm, to sow terror and despair. The extraordinary case that is about to be unveiled within the coming minutes stands as a truly astounding narrative, a testament to the inexplicable. It transcends the boundaries of common understanding, presenting itself as one of the most thoroughly documented and profoundly fabulous paranormal events ever recorded across the entirety of Latin America. At its core is the persistent, unsettling presence of a strange and malevolent entity, a being that has been cited by a multitude of disparate witnesses over the decades. This enigmatic figure has been unequivocally identified by many of those who have encountered her as a vampire woman, a vampiress that prowls and preys within the deepest, most impenetrable shadows of the night. To cast a much-needed beam of light upon this profound mystery, a distinguished journalist and seasoned investigator has been invited to share his extraordinary findings, the fruits of years spent delving into the dark heart of this phenomenon. His journey has unearthed astonishing revelations that challenge the very fabric of accepted reality. This particular chapter of the ongoing saga is one that no one should dare to miss, for it directly addresses the unsettling and pervasive existence of a creature that, according to countless testimonies, emerges in various isolated corners of the world, perhaps even lurking disconcertingly close to the very homes of those who are now listening to this chilling account. Its presence is a stark reminder that the veil between worlds is thinner than many presume. The esteemed investigator present, known simply as El Periodista, a journalist of considerable renown, and an individual whose professional career has been built upon the bedrock of verifiable facts, graciously accepted the invitation. His acceptance was imbued with a profound sense of gratitude, expressing deep appreciation for the unique opportunity to share his harrowing experiences and crucially to address the pressing concerns and unanswered questions of a public increasingly aware of the unseen. His primary, deeply personal motivation in coming forward was to empower individuals, to ensure that people might learn how to effectively protect themselves from the insidious influence and physical threat posed by such dark, malevolent entities. This was a vital knowledge, he explained, that he himself had been forced to acquire through the most drastic and terrifying of circumstances. In the not-so-distant past, he readily admitted, he considered himself an unwavering skeptic, a staunch and convinced atheist who placed his absolute trust solely in the empirical explanations provided by the rigorous methods of science and logic. He believed only in what could be seen, touched, measured, and proven. However, the profoundly unsettling and utterly inexplicable events that he personally witnessed, experiences that ripped through the fabric of his rational understanding, completely shattered his perception of the world. These encounters irrevocably compelled him to confront a stark and terrifying reality, one that defied every established law of logic, every scientific principle he had ever held dear. His remarkable trajectory, charting a course from deep-seated incredulity to a profound, unwavering conviction in the existence of the supernatural, forms an integral and deeply compelling part of this astonishing and unsettling narrative. The genesis of this profoundly enigmatic case, the very point from which this dark river of events began to flow, can be traced back to a seemingly routine professional assignment: the pursuit of a news story of a purely criminal nature. El Periodista, in his formative years, imbued with the characteristic youthful ingenuity and a certain naivete typical of that era, had embarked upon this investigation with the expectation of dismantling a conventional criminal gang. His initial target was a ruthless collective of delinquents, criminals dedicated to the systematic slaughter of men, for every single victim discovered was male, a chilling pattern. Although a latent, almost subconscious intuition subtly suggested the potential involvement of a woman in these gruesome acts, his initial rational focus remained squarely on the investigation of conventional homicides, the kind that could be explained by human malice and motive. With unwavering dedication, every Sunday evening, he would meticulously patrol the same crucial neuralgic point, a location steeped in history and local lore, the celebrated Bridge of Sighs, or Puente de los Suspiros, a venerable and picturesque wooden structure dating back to the viceregal era, its timber weathered by centuries of stories. He walked tirelessly along its ancient planks, ascending its gentle slope, descending again, venturing towards the nearby beach, and then diligently returning, a solitary journey that typically spanned approximately 2 hours. His dedicated rounds commenced between the hours of 8 and 10 in the evening, often extending well past midnight, sometimes even beyond the witching hour. His demanding work schedule at the television channel where he began his shift at 3 in the morning as an assistant to the director of the 6 o'clock news broadcast afforded him the unique window of opportunity for these extensive nocturnal investigations. His initial inquiries led him naturally to the proprietors of the local nightclubs, the bustling bars, and the elegant restaurants that dotted the Barranco landscape. This was a strategic choice, for the common people merely transiting through the streets possessed no relevant information. They were transient visitors, not ingrained residents of the area. It was among the diligent waiters and the attentive waitresses of these very establishments individuals who heard and saw much in the late hours that he first began to hear the faint, unsettling whispers of ancient stories, hushed legends that spoke with growing insistence of an ancestral witch, a dark figure from the district's forgotten past. These burgeoning stories, imbued with an eerie sense of history, meticulously placed the existence of this enigmatic witch to the twilight years of the 1920s, specifically centering around the year 1929, just prior to the dawn of the 1930s. The typical narrative, a chilling and consistent thread running through all accounts, revolved around a profoundly dark pact allegedly made by this mysterious woman. Her sinister objective was the preservation of her eternal youth, an unholy ritual that, according to the lore, demanded nothing less than the lives of young men. This motif, the sacrifice of the young to sustain the old, resonates deeply with countless folkloric traditions and dark legends found in cultures across, tinged with a palpable underlying tremor of fear, spoke openly, albeit cautiously, of the Witch of Barranco. This growing chorus of testimony compelled him to alter his investigative approach. He was driven to directly interrogate the most senior residents of the district, those who could be found sitting contemplatively at the thresholds of their homes, or perhaps like an old woman, meticulously sweeping her entrance guardians of fading memories. Several of these venerable individuals, their eyes holding the weight of decades, unequivocally confirmed the existence of a very famous witch in the 20s and 30s, an ancient legend that, by the time of his investigation between 1990 and 1992, dated back approximately 60 years. Sadly, all these original voices, the primary custodians of the initial terrifying history, have since vanished with the inexorable passage of time, taking their first-hand accounts with them. The complete, unadulterated narrative, told directly by those who lived through that chilling era, was irrevocably lost. Nevertheless, through diligent effort and persistent questioning, El Periodista managed to meticulously collect vestiges of the story, fragments recounted by people who had heard it from others, who in turn had heard it from still others. These were not direct testimonies from eyewitnesses, but rather from individuals who had resided in Barranco for 30 or even 50 years, absorbing the local lore through osmosis, keeping the chilling legend alive through generations of whispered fear. The culmination of this profound and increasingly unsettling investigation occurred on the final Sunday that El Periodista visited Barranco, a place he would not return to for approximately 10 years thereafter, haunted by an overwhelming, lingering sense of dread. On that decisive, fateful night, as the shadows deepened and the air grew heavy with anticipation, he encountered a group of sweet vendors, figures that, tragically, no longer grace the historic bridge with their presence today. These were elderly women, their faces etched with the wisdom and weariness of life, likely in their 50s or 60s, offering traditional Peruvian desserts nestled in small, inviting containers. One of them, a woman of ample build and advanced age, visibly fatigued by the long hours and the weight of her own history, observed him passing back and forth multiple times with an unnerving intensity. "Young man, are you a journalist?" she inquired, her voice raspy with age, intuiting his profession with uncanny accuracy from his ever-present notepad and his incessant, probing questions. He approached her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face at the old woman's sharp perceptiveness. "You're looking for the witch, aren't you? The Witch of Barranco," she affirmed, her words clear and resonant despite the ambient sounds of the night. Although he insisted, maintaining his professional facade that he was merely investigating the brutal murders that plagued the area, the old woman unequivocally associated the heinous crimes with the very witch he initially dismissed as folklore. "If you buy from me, I'll tell you the story," she proposed, her eyes holding a knowing glint. El Periodista, his thirst for information now overshadowing his initial skepticism, eagerly acquired several of her traditional desserts. The woman, her voice now dropping to a grave, conspiratorial tone, revealed a chilling truth. "I have seen her. Everyone here has seen her, but no one dares to speak out of fear." The atmosphere around them palpably thickened, charged with an unspoken dread. His initial journalistic interest in the local legend began to subtly transform into an incipient gnawing terror, an unsettling feeling that crept in despite his rational skepticism regarding the common tales of flying witches with grotesque claws, a mere superstition in his scientific worldview. The elderly vendor, her eyes fixed on El Periodista with an unsettling intensity, continued her chilling narrative, meticulously explaining that the enigmatic woman appeared with a terrifying regularity. Every 30 years, almost to the day. Her own grandmother, she recounted, who had also been a vendor of traditional picarones on the very same bridge during the 1930s, had personally witnessed the entity with her own eyes. And then, decades later, her own mother had encountered the same spectral figure in the 1960s. Now, in the very present, she herself had seen it in the 1990s. Despite his persistent focus on the current, tangible murders, the vendor steadfastly insisted upon the singular, pervasive truth of the witch. He who seeks, finds. "Go home," she warned him, her voice repeating the admonition with a chilling, undeniable forcefulness that resonated deep within his bones. For El Periodista, a man of the late 20th century, the very concept of witches was nothing more than a quaint superstition, an archaic belief system belonging to a bygone era. Yet the old woman's testimony chipped away at his rational armor. She revealed that all the vendors, a silent fraternity of night watchmen, knew this terrifying secret. It was for this very reason, she explained, that by midnight the venerable bridge would become utterly deserted, abandoned to the chilling presence that only they acknowledged. She then provided him with remarkably detailed descriptions of the entity. It consistently appeared as a young woman, seemingly between 20 and 26 years of age, dressed entirely in the deepest, most opaque black. But critically, she possessed distinctive, unsettling marks on her neck. El Periodista, still deeply absorbed in his relentless pursuit of conventional criminals, could not then fully grasp the profound relevance or terrifying significance of these specific marks. The woman, however, delivered a crucial, life-altering warning. "If you see her first, you might escape alive. Run with all your soul. But if she sees you first, you are already dead." A growing, insidious terror began to insidiously grip him, consuming his thoughts. He found himself locked in an internal struggle, a fierce debate between his ingrained rationalism, his belief in the immutable laws of science, and the looming, ineludible threat of an imminent, inexplicable encounter. His mind, stubbornly clinging to the elegant equations of Einstein and the profound mathematics of Hilbert, desperately fought to deny the very existence of that which was now being presented to him as a mere local legend, a fantastical tale that simply could not be real. After acquiring additional desserts, a small price to pay for the complete harrowing story, the old woman finally revealed the darker purpose behind the entity's existence. It had made a pact, a malevolent agreement requiring the lives of young men, all of them approximately 30 years of age. The witch, the witch, the witch, her name, or rather the title attributed to her, resonated incessantly, a chilling echo in the night. It was said that she was always seen at the very end of a narrow secluded path less than 100 meters wide, a path that ultimately led to a breathtaking lookout point, an imposing cliff face dramatically overlooking the vast, dark expanse of the sea. El Periodista, compelled by a mixture of journalistic duty and burgeoning dread, began to traverse this very path, a route that ran adjacent to a venerable local parish. Halfway along the dimly lit trail, nestled on the low wall of a small, unkempt garden, a young couple sat in earnest conversation. The young man, seemingly around 30 years old, spoke animatedly, his words carrying on the still night air, while his companion remained eerily silent, her presence almost unnaturally still. As El Periodista passed by them, he initially paid them little attention, his mind singularly focused on his primary objectives. Either the elusive assassins or the increasingly tangible witch, certainly not a pair of lovers lost in their own world. However, an inexplicable, powerful curiosity, a subtle prickling sensation that defied logic, compelled him to turn his head and glance back. What he saw sent a ripple of unease through him. The girl, instead of gazing at her companion with the expected affection, was fixated with a predatory intensity on the young man's neck, specifically in the area of his trachea. Her gaze was not one of love, but of a raptor, an eagle meticulously stalking its unsuspecting prey. Her eyes, completely devoid of any white, were of an absolute, consuming blackness, the darkest he had ever witnessed in any living being. A profound chill snaked down El Periodista's spine, a cold dread that penetrated to his very bones. Yet he made a conscious effort to ignore it. telling himself he did not wish to intrude upon the intimacy of the couple. Suddenly, with a disconcerting swiftness, the young woman lifted her head, her gaze shifting from her companion to him. She followed his every movement with an unyielding fixity. Her eyes, like laser beams, remained locked onto him without yielding a single millimeter as he continued to walk away. He desperately tried to avoid her gaze, to break the unsettling connection, but the sheer force of her magnetic stare was inescapable, pulling at him with an unseen power. The young man, oblivious to the terrifying drama unfolding beside him, with his curly hair and a leather jacket, continued his animated chatter, completely unaware of the disturbing connection that had been forged. The girl, dressed in a black turtleneck that reached her neck, devoid of any earrings, with a mouth that appeared to be painted a deep, matte black, presented an unsettling image. Her appearance vaguely reminded him of the Gothic or emo subcultures, though in 1990, such styles were still largely unknown or nascent. Her gaze was so potent, her overall demeanor so profoundly disquieting, that El Periodista felt a wave of mounting fear wash over him. He found himself comparing her unnerving stare to that of the terrifying girl from the film The Ring, a look both sinister and deeply unsettling. She continued to follow him with her eyes until he finally disappeared from her line of sight further down the path, the weight of her gaze still heavy upon him. As he drew nearer to the lookout point, a place that now felt imbued with an ominous, palpable dread, he found himself compelled to glance back once more. And there she remained, the young woman, still fixed in her spot, her eyes once again piercing him with a gaze that seemed intent on his utter annihilation. El Periodista, a self-professed atheist, inwardly swore that had he not been so, he would have invoked the names of every saint, every divine protector he could recall. The fear, an insidious, creeping sensation, began to climb relentlessly through his body, transforming from a mere unease into a profound, suffocating preoccupation, a primal dread. Arriving at the very end of the narrow corridor, at the panoramic lookout point overlooking the dark, churning sea, the cold intensified dramatically, a bone-chilling dampness that seemed to seep into his very soul. It was now approximately 1:15 or 1:30 in the morning, the darkest hours of the early new day. He remained there, perhaps for a period of 45 minutes, his senses acutely alert, his journalistic instincts still overriding his growing terror, patiently awaiting the appearance of some elusive assassin, or, perhaps, the manifestation of the dark entity that now consumed his thoughts. Suddenly, in the profound silence of the pre-dawn hours, something stirred in one of the trees. These were slender yet remarkably tall trees, easily 5 meters in height, characteristic of the area and iconic even today. The time was approximately 2:30 in the morning. What he observed next defied every rational conception, every logical framework he possessed. It was a human figure, or rather a humanoid shape, its face entirely painted in an opaque, stark white, eerily reminiscent of the street mimes who performed in sunlit squares. But this figure was encamped inexplicably some 4 or 5 meters up, nestled within the dense foliage of the tree's very crown. What is that? What is a mime doing perched in a tree at 2:40 in the morning? He silently questioned, his mind reeling, utterly incapable of reconciling what his eyes were seeing with any semblance of reality. A profound sense of strangeness, an unsettling blend of disbelief and mounting fear, washed over him. Having found neither the assassin nor a victim, nor any evidence of the crime he had initially sought, he made a resolute decision to depart, to retreat from this escalating strangeness. As he consulted his watch, its luminous dial clearly marked 2:45 in the morning, a precise time he would forever recall with chilling clarity. The cold was now terrible, an oppressive, penetrating chill. The pervasive humidity from the nearby beach seemed to seep into his very bones, indicating that it was likely June or July, the heart of the Peruvian winter. As he prepared to finally depart, to put distance between himself and the unsettling scene, he instinctively turned over his shoulder, It was at this precise moment that the most profound, primal terror imaginable assailed him, striking him with the force of a physical blow. The woman, the very same young woman, seemingly 25 years old, whom he had observed earlier with the young man in the passageway, was suddenly there. Her chin rested lightly upon his shoulder, her presence startlingly close, her stature slightly shorter than his, perhaps around 1 meter 50-something. Her head was positioned directly behind his own, a horrifying proximity. He recoiled violently, a sharp, involuntary movement, then spun around, instantly frozen. An inexplicable rigidity, a sudden, absolute paralysis, invaded every fiber of his being, locking him in place. It was not the conventional panic of a terrified mind that immobilized him, but rather an invisible yet overwhelmingly potent force, a kind of physiological freezing that rendered him utterly incapable of moving even the slightest muscle, not even an eyelid. Despite the complete immobility of his body, his mind remained unnervingly lucid, observing with silent, petrified horror the terrifying proximity of that apparition. Her eyes, completely devoid of any white sclera, were utterly black. Everything was darkness, mirroring the infamous descriptions of so-called black-eyed children. He desperately willed himself to move, to scream, to make any sound, but his body was as stone, every muscle refusing to obey his frantic commands. Only his eyes retained their ability to move, darting about in a desperate search for an escape, while his brain screamed, clamoring for immediate action, for any form of self-preservation. Before him, with a chillingly deliberate motion, the entity slowly opened her mouth. What she revealed was utterly ghastly, a sight that would forever be seared into his memory. A set of teeth that were utterly rotten, decayed beyond recognition, clearly not belonging to a young woman, but rather to an ancient, decaying hag. And between those putrid teeth, disturbingly, was a greenish, slimy substance, sea moss, as if she had recently emerged from the depths of the ocean. As he observed her, utterly petrified, unable to move a single muscle, her face began a horrifying process of disintegration. It started to crack and fragment, much like a delicate porcelain mask succumbing to immense internal pressure, the pristine white surface peeling away. Beneath this fracturing facade, a viscous, disturbing paste was revealed, a grotesque material that seemed to form the very texture of her underlying skin. Before him, mere centimeters away, the face of the seemingly 25 or 26-year-old woman transformed completely, morphing into a horrifying, nightmarish visage. She became not merely old, but a creature seemingly ripped from the deepest, most tormented nightmares, a vision of pure malevolence straight from the infernal realms. Her neck then seemed to unnaturally stretch, to elevate slightly, subtly elongating, and it was at that precise, horrifying moment that, peeking out from above the collar of her black turtleneck, he glimpsed a series of truly dreadful marks near her ear. These were tremendous lacerations, deep, raw gashes, as if she had engaged in a brutal, savage combat with an animal possessing razor-sharp claws. Multiple, overlapping cuts covered her entire neck, a testament to some unspeakable violence. In that instant, a terrifying clarity pierced through his paralysis. He vividly recalled the ominous warning given by the sweet vendor regarding the distinctive marks on the entity's body. Incapable of moving his head, or indeed any part of his body, he could only see from her neck upwards, an unwilling witness to the tremendous, horrifying lacerations that marred her flesh. The woman, her terrifying transformation complete, then slowly, deliberately leaned closer, her nose almost touching his own, her lips hovering barely a centimeter from his. She opened her mouth once more, and from it she uttered a question in a voice that was utterly unforgettable. A sound that was not that of a young woman, but rather of an ancient transformed hag, a voice seemingly extracted directly from the deepest pits of hell itself. "Do you know what time it is?" she rasped. He, utterly immobile, unable to move even his lips or blink his eyelashes, could only stare back into the abyssal blackness of her eyes. "It's the hour of the dead," the voice chillingly pronounced, its words hanging heavy in the cold night air. As she spoke, her wrinkles deepened. The visible striations of her ancient skin became more pronounced, and the myriad cuts on her face, now fully revealed, stood out with horrifying clarity. The illusion of the white mask completely disintegrated. A profound, palpable malevolence emanated from her, an overwhelming aura of pure evil. She was the very personification of wickedness itself, a being comparable to the terrifying Bathsheba from the chilling film The Conjuring. In that petrifying moment, the entity suddenly lunged towards him, a swift, predatory movement, as if to bite him directly on the mouth. From some deep, unexplored recess of his being, a primal instinct for survival surged, and he found an uncharacteristic, almost supernatural strength. This burst of raw power miraculously broke the dark spell that had held him in its paralyzing grip. With a sudden explosive surge of adrenaline, he violently recoiled, staggering backward, and then, with all the force he could muster, he shoved her away. Her arms, which he briefly touched, were shockingly skeletal, mere bone encased in parchment-thin skin, devoid of any flesh or muscle. As he pushed her, he simultaneously turned and fled, running desperately, his heart pounding like a drum, through the long, narrow passageway, which stretched approximately 80 to 100 meters. As he sprinted past the spot where he had previously seen the couple, he noticed with a jolt that it was now utterly deserted. There was no one there, the silence unnerving. Behind him, piercing the stillness of the night, a series of spine-chilling shrieks erupted, sounds eerily reminiscent of a hyena or some other wild, predatory animal, echoing ominously through the darkness. Simultaneously, he felt a distinct rush of cold air on the nape of his neck, a terrifying sensation of something unseen attempting to grasp him, narrowly missing its target. He continued his desperate flight, his legs burning, across the old creaking planks of the Puente de los Suspiros, and then down the wide stone stairs that led steeply to the park below, each step a frantic leap away from the pursuing horror. Upon reaching the midpoint of the historic bridge, he risked a momentary, terrified glance over his shoulder. And there she was, a horrifyingly distinct female humanoid figure. Her hair, an impossibly long, jet-black cascade, flowed wildly, almost 1.5 meters in length, floating unnaturally in the air as if caught in a silent, unseen current. Her mouth had grotesquely stretched, extending far back to her ears, a terrifying visage reminiscent of the most malevolent demonic entities found in ancient Japanese folklore. Her eyes, too, had elongated, acquiring unsettling, distinctly oriental features, much like the stylized, sinister masks of traditional Japanese theater, with their corners stretching backward into sharp, predatory points. Her mouth was immense, gargantuan, filled with countless needle-sharp teeth, akin to the terrifying, luminous abyssal fish found in the deepest, darkest trenches of the ocean. This was not merely a woman. It was a transformed animal, a demon made flesh, a creature torn from the most ancient, terrifying Oriental legends of Japan, China, or Indochina. Her hands had morphed into grotesque, elongated claws, her skin an unearthly, spectral white. Not the pallor of an albino, but a chilling, otherworldly whiteness, complemented by long, black nails. That monstrous creature with its unnaturally grown hands lunged, attempting to seize him by the neck. The terrifying vision lasted only a single, agonizing second. An indelible, photographic image burned forever into the deepest recesses of his mind, before he resumed his frantic, desperate sprint down the stairs, away from the abject horror. The spine-chilling shrieks persisted, echoing disturbingly behind him, until he finally reached the midpoint of the long, winding staircase. At that precise point, as if cut off by an invisible barrier, the terrifying sounds abruptly ceased. There, utterly drenched in sweat as if he had just emerged from a swimming pool, his entire body soaked from head to toe, he finally paused. Slowly, Cautiously, he turned around, his senses on high alert, but there was nothing. The malevolent entity had vanished, disappearing as suddenly and inexplicably as it had appeared, attributing the entirety of the harrowing experience to a series of vivid visions, products of his extreme exhaustion, the influence of the local stories, and the intense cold. He, in his ingrained atheist and rationalist mindset, desperately attempted to construct a logical, scientific explanation for the unbelievable events. However, as he turned his gaze towards a group of children huddled on the very last step of the staircase, the piranhas, as they were known, young pickpockets who frequented the park, he saw their eyes. They were unnaturally wide, dilated with unadulterated terror, staring into the middle distance. These were small children, perhaps only 5 years old, and they looked at him as if they had just witnessed the devil himself, their fear far more profound and visceral than his own. El Periodista, slowly recomposing himself, approached them cautiously and inquired, his voice still shaky, "What's wrong? Did you see a ghost?" The children, babbling incoherently, stumbling over their words in their haste to speak, recounted their versions. "A woman was chasing him," one stammered. "No, it was an animal," another corrected. "It was a monster," a third cried. "It had claws." Crucially, their accounts, each from their innocent, childlike perspective, confirmed the essence of what he himself had witnessed. The core details were identical. A woman dressed in black, a monstrous creature with long claws and hair that floated eerily in the air. It was in that profound, terrifying moment, hearing their independent corroboration, that El Periodista began to fully conceive of the horrifying, undeniable reality of what he had just experienced. His entire paradigm, the bedrock of his science, his physics, and his mathematics, everything he had ever believed, crumbled completely before the undeniable, irrefutable existence of the inexplicable. That profoundly transformative experience, an event that ripped through the fabric of his rational understanding, indelibly marked his rebirth as a dedicated paranormal investigator, forever changing the course of his life and career. Years later, in the year 2005, a security camera in Barranco, by sheer chance, managed to capture a fleeting glimpse of the mysterious woman dressed in black during the early hours of the morning. Although the grainy footage, which had been broadcast on a television program at the time, was tragically lost to the relentless passage of years, El Periodista had the invaluable opportunity to speak with the producer in 2018. The producer unequivocally confirmed the existence and veracity of those chilling images, lending further weight to the growing body of evidence. Later, in 2013, El Periodista had tentatively published his harrowing story on his personal Facebook wall, a digital testament to his ordeal. On one memorable occasion, while listening to a late-night radio program, he heard the renowned Ciro Amadeo recount a strikingly similar story. Amadeo described a terrifying encounter with a woman who had abruptly leaped from a taxi, only to transform into a horrifying, dog-like entity. A vampira, he suggested, one that fed on blood. The description of the woman, notably in her early 20s to mid-20s, and the chilling nature of the encounter resonated with an uncanny precision with his own deeply personal and terrifying experience. The independent testimonies continued to multiply, each one adding another layer to the chilling mosaic of the supernatural. The piranhas, children, those young street dwellers who had witnessed his frantic flight, also unequivocally affirmed having seen the creature. This entity, now widely referred to by many as the Vampiress of Barranco, or simply the Vampire Woman, had solidified its place in local lore. Driven by an insatiable thirst for answers, El Periodista meticulously investigated ancient Greek legends and the dark folklore of Eastern Europe, pondering the unsettling possibility of encountering a Lamia, a demonic being said to prey on babies and kill adults. He also delved into the rich tapestry of Indian mythical figures, exploring the terrifying Rakshasa, a demon known for appearing as a familiar person before morphing into its true monstrous form to kill. Similar chilling vestiges of such entities he discovered were also found in the dense, mysterious Peruvian jungle. However, his extensive research eventually led him to the ancient cultures of Vietnam and the lowlands of China, where he finally found the most accurate and chilling description of a specific demonic entity known as the Aswang. The traditional drawings and detailed accounts of this creature intrinsically associated with vampirism and consistently depicted with a skeletal appearance and long predatory claws coincided with chilling perfection, with every detail of what El Periodista had so horrifyingly witnessed that fateful night. The culmination of his exhaustive research led El Periodista to a profound and unsettling conclusion. This terrifying entity was not, in fact, the original witch of the Barranco legend. The witch, he deduced, was a human being who had lived in the year 1929, a woman who had, in all likelihood, forged a dark pact with malevolent, unseen entities. Upon her eventual death, the pre-existing, powerful supernatural entity had taken full possession of her corporeal form, acquiring her physical appearance but being, in its true essence, a demon. This phenomenon, he explained, was chillingly analogous to the legend of La Llorona, a human being whose soul, upon death, becomes ensnared and imprisoned by a dark entity that subsequently adopts her tragic form, perpetuating her sorrow and terror. El Periodista's own harrowing experience with this creature occurred in the early 1990s, while other documented sightings and encounters dated to 2005, 2007, and 2018, painting a chilling pattern of intermittent appearances. It became terrifyingly clear that his miraculous escape from certain death had, in some inexplicable way, broken a preordained chain of events, for he, by all indications, would have been the entity's next victim. The young man he had observed conversing so innocently with the entity on the path was tragically found dead on the nearby beach that very same morning, his throat horribly slashed from ear to ear, his trachea brutally torn out, having bled completely dry, a horrific testament to the creature's insatiable hunger. In the most recent years, a curious shift has been observed. The malevolent entity has not, to the best of current knowledge, resumed its murderous attacks. However, it has continued to be sighted on several occasions, its dark presence lingering. Fishermen, casting their nets in the early hours along the rugged cliffs of Barranco and Carrillos, have reported seeing a distinct, shadowy black silhouette moving with unnerving fluidity within the depths of the coastal caves. The creature, it seems, remains very much present, still lurking within the ancient dark recesses of the land. Yet the times have undeniably changed. Barranco is no longer the dimly lit, isolated district it once was. With increased street lighting and enhanced security measures, the opportunities for the entity to prey, unnoticed, have diminished. The prevailing hope, a silent prayer whispered by many, is that it will not resume its terrifying attacks, or perhaps that it will eventually choose to relocate to seek out another more secluded region of the planet where it can continue its dark existence undisturbed. For El Periodista, the undeniable existence of this malevolent being is not merely a belief, but a profound certainty, etched into his very soul by personal trauma. His life underwent a radical, irreversible transformation, shifting dramatically from that of a staunch skeptic who placed his absolute faith solely in the empirical truths of science to that of a deeply convinced investigator of the paranormal, one who now understands, with terrifying clarity, that beings from another reality not only exist but actively lurk and intervene in the intricate tapestry of our lives. These terrifying encounters, which, chillingly, have not been the only ones he has faced, have profoundly modified his perception of the universe. They have compelled him to delve into the complex studies of psychology, the theological study of eschatology, and the philosophical exploration of hermeneutics, moving far beyond his initial academic pursuits in astronomy, mathematics, and physics. In Barranco, in that seemingly ordinary yet deeply storied place, something truly special resides, something that transcends the realm of mere legend, a being that for countless others is nothing more than a myth, a fantastical tale. But for El Periodista, and for the dozens of other witnesses who have glimpsed its terrifying form, it is a chilling, undeniable reality. This malevolent being, which is said to inhabit the dark swamps and hidden caves, and which manifests in subtly different forms across various human cultures, stands as palpable proof that there are hidden dimensions, unseen realities that actively interact and intersect with our own. His story serves as a chilling, profound reminder that the unknown, the ineffable, can always emerge unexpectedly from the deepest shadows to challenge and ultimately shatter our most fundamental understanding of the world and our place within it.